So there's a point where there's too little or too much of insurance, and finding that sweet spot is the key in all of this, so that you're protected but not overpaying.
I think that's a fair comment to say about most things, right? Like, you want to make sure that you've got the level of anything that's relevant and suitable for your circumstances. And if you think about, like what you were describing, the shape that your life goes through, it does change over time.
Welcome to 360 Money Matters, where financial planners Billy and Andrew talk all things financial planning. This podcast aims to increase your knowledge and confidence with all things money. Each week, they will cover topics such as investing, cash flow, budgeting, saving, passive income, debt management, and much more, so you can live a life on your terms without limits.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the 360 Money Matters podcast. I'm Billy and I'm joined by my co-host,
Andrew. Bills, here we are back on the podcast, back to our favorite time of the week.
Andrew, we are back and talking about a topic today that really suits the people that we talk to day in, day out. And I think it's one of those things that is good to have, but it's a bit of a pain in the neck. And look, we'll get to it. We're talking to people about insurance and especially protecting your family, right? So talking about what that is, and it's an expense that you don't want. It's something that you don't wish that you ever use, but something that if anything ever happened, you're glad that you did.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those necessary evils. But I find it's also one of those things that people don't normally consider until you've put it in front of them. And it may have been something that they thought about loosely, but never actually fully, looked at. But look, I think that the big, thing that we're wanting people to take out of this is making sure that, number one, you want to ensure that you're protected. Mm-hmm. You want to ensure that your family is protected, and that, that's aligning with your life stage, that's aligning with, your mortgage, age of dependence, all of that stuff, to make sure that you're fully protected. But then at the same time, there is a point where you can have too much. And, we've been in plenty of meetings before where we've sat in front of a client, we've looked at their insurances, and, maybe it was something that was set up, 10 years ago, and that was relevant for them at that point in time. But for the last 5 of those years, they've been massively over-insured, and the cost of premiums has only risen. And so all of a sudden, it's too much. It's hugely expensive. It's having a drain on their finances, and they just didn't need that level of cover and have probably over-insured for a period of time. So there's a point where there's too little or too much of insurance, and finding that sweet spot is the key in all of this, so that you're protected but not overpaying.
I think that's a fair comment to say about most things, right? Like, you want to make sure that you've got the level of anything that's relevant and suitable for your circumstances. And if you think about, like what you were describing, the shape that your life goes through, it does change over time. You buy a mortgage, you buy a house, you have a mortgage, you've got more debt, you have young kids, everybody's dependent on you and relying on you. That tends to diminish over time in terms of the size of the debt that you've got, and obviously kids become more and more independent, so it does change. So I think finding the right set or the right amount for you is critical. Knowing that it's not set and forget, knowing that it does change with time. Andrew, 4 types of protection that we talk to people about.
Yeah, so look, I'll run through generally the 4 biggest personal insurances, or the core types of personal insurances that you can have. Life insurance, pretty straightforward. Touch wood, pass away, an amount gets paid out to who you like. There's income protection.
Sorry, just on that also includes if somebody is diagnosed with a terminal illness as well too. So if they've got 24 months or less to live, that will also trigger a payout as well. So it's not like it. Yeah,
it can happen, or it can be brought forward
in that circumstance.
Yeah. There's permanent disability, where if you can never work again in your occupation or any occupation, depending on the definition, it's a lump sum payout. Income protection, which is if you can't work temporarily, you'll receive a portion of your income for a period of time. Can be depending on what the waiting period is and how long the benefit period is, but you'll receive generally a monthly payment, which is a percentage of your income. and trauma or critical illness, which will pay a lump sum if you're diagnosed with a major illness. There's, depending on the policy, a number of different conditions, anywhere from sort of 40 to 60, depending on the insurer. The biggest claims for critical illness are cancer, stroke, heart attack. Those are usually the three biggest medical events where you'll be paid out in a trauma insurance claim.
Mm-hmm. And Andrew, just to elaborate on those as well too, because with most of them, they're pretty straightforward in terms of what they're designed to cover. But I think the thing that I want to point out is that they do work in conjunction with each other. So with something like a life insurance event, yeah, sure, you're either terminal, take that off the table though, or you've passed away. It's either happened suddenly or something's happened and then it's led to the passing. So if it's something that's happened over time, it could be that, somebody's been sick, they can't work, income protection kicks in, covers them for a period of time with a monthly income payment, and then for whatever reason they don't recover from it or what have you, and they pass away, life insurance then gets paid out.
Yep.
Same sort of thing, that something happens to someone, they can't work for a period of time, and then they realize that, hey, it's not going to kill them, but they're never going to go back to work. So income protection pays out, and then total and permanent disability pays out because they're never going to go back to work as well too. So there are certain points in time where this cover does cross over. Because one of the questions that we get asked quite often is, how come we're going for all four types of cover? And they're all designed to do different things, but I just thought it would be important to point that out, that they are designed to cover different things and they do work sort of in conjunction with each other when you sort of think through how a medical condition can evolve and how that can have an impact on somebody.
Yeah, and look, one of the many benefits of advice in this area is that an advisor will be able to make sure that, there's a point where you can say, yes, all of the covers are relevant, but maybe you don't necessarily need all of the policy definitions as individual policies, and you can have some covers that will start to offset each other, so that if you claim on one, it'll reduce the benefit in another. So, I think that maybe one of the easiest examples is when you start talking about permanent disability and life insurance. Now, generally speaking, when you're talking about, what you want to cover from a permanent disability claim and a life insurance claim, is you want to make sure that you're paying off, let's say, the mortgage that's associated with your family home. Now, if you've already been paid out on permanent disability, and you've already paid out the mortgage, well, then you don't need that same level of cover on your life insurance policy because that's already been taken care of with the permanent disability claim. So that's when, an advisor might start looking at linking cover, where if you claim on one, it'll reduce the benefit in another in order to keep the premiums down. Or in another set of circumstances, then you might say, no, this person, wants them to not be a linked policy for X, Y, Z reason, in which case you wouldn't do that. So I think that when it does come to this, getting advice is only positive, because an advisor will be able to put those things in front of you. And even considering, one of the questions that I've had from clients in the past is, I'm the main breadwinner. I earn the majority of the income, so there's no point insuring, a partner's income. And that's all good and well, but sometimes just having someone, explain that, okay, well, what would happen if something did happen to your partner? You may be the main breadwinner and say, yes, your income is higher, but if your partner was, either permanently disabled or was under an income protection claim, and you had a family with kids, now you have a partner to take care of, you also have kids that are still going to be reliant on you, are you going to be able to work and generate the same level of income that you're currently doing? Or are you going to have to drop your work hours, or are you having to, drop the type of role that you're doing in order to be able to support the family from a lifestyle standpoint? Versus, okay, you've got an income protection policy that, covers that person, and all of a sudden, you can reduce your work hours as a result of it. So I think that, someone being able to give you an unbiased viewpoint of, hey, here are the implications, and whatever decision you then make at the end of it is your decision ultimately, but be armed with the information.
Yeah. that's actually a good segue into sort of the most common mistakes that we see people make. And I actually think that one probably should have gone into this category. But the most common mistake is people not thinking through the ramifications and then sort of immediately discounting the amount of cover that they do need. I see that one all of the time. And you think, and this isn't meant to sound sexist or whatever, but my partner stays at home and looks after the child. I earn all the money, so I need to be insured, but not them. But then if something happened to your spouse, you'd have to stop working to look after the child, right? So it's equally important for everybody involved. So yeah, just interesting enough. But one of the other common mistakes as well too, a lot of people think that they're covered appropriately because most people have default cover with inside their superannuation. So you can automatically think, yep, I've got cover, I don't need to think about it. But when you dig a little bit deeper, it could be the wrong occupation class. You could have insufficient cover. A lot of the automatic stuff that gets given out there's poor definitions associated with it as well too. The payout claims ratio is often low. The speed to payout is often slow as well too. So thinking through that and going, okay, just because you've got some cover doesn't necessarily mean it's the right cover for you and your circumstances. It's not enough just to think on that superficial level to say, hey, I've got some, I'm good, tick.
Yeah, and very often, I mean, it's usually not an amount of cover that's sufficient. You know, most automatic acceptance covers, you're talking about, you know, as a maximum, you're looking at maybe $500,000 of life and TPD. You consider that most people have a mortgage that, you know, significantly outstrips that. You throw dependents into the mix, you throw medical conditions into the mix, and all of a sudden it's nowhere near enough cover. So really looking at, okay, what do I have? Is it worthwhile keeping? Do I look at another policy? Do I look at something else? Is critical. And when we are talking about, you know, insurance, when we're going through it, we're looking at a needs-based approach. So anytime that we're offering advice, it's what would someone like and what would we recommend that they need from an insurance policy? You know, do we cover all debts, or do we just cover the debt that's associated with an owned or occupied property? Do we, you know, replace income for a period of time because maybe income protection will only cover 70% and we want to cover that other 30%? You know, do we need to fund education costs because there's maybe private school fees that are in there that you want to ensure that are still going to get funded if something happens to you? So I think that it's not quite as simple as, you know, maybe some of the traditional approaches in the past, a fair few years ago, where you would maybe say, you know, multiples of income
or I need $1 million of cover.
Yeah, or I need $1 million of cover because that just sounds like a good number. It's one of those things that, you know, our first approach is you take the guesswork out of it and you basically look at what are your needs? Yeah, how much insurance do you need? Mm-hmm. And then the next question is, okay, if that's the amount of insurance cover that you need, what insurer is going to be appropriate? Start talking about medical conditions, exclusions, loadings, things like that on policies. If you've got a pre-existing condition, an insurer is not going to insure a pre-existing condition. Mm-hmm. So maybe it's a combination of, hey, let's retain this, you know, default or existing insurance that you already have, and let's top up with this because a new cover is going to have some exclusions on the policy. Or maybe it's, okay, you know, insurer A looks at your medical condition very harshly, but insurer B, which maybe is slightly more expensive, is going to not put any exclusions or anything on your pre-existing medical conditions. So for that reason, we're going to go with insurer B because it's going to cover everything, even though it might be at an additional cost, and yeah, that's worthwhile. But first things first, you're working out how much insurance do you need. Then you're looking at, okay, what's the most, you know, appropriate insurer and product at the end of it.
Yeah, and thinking about how do you structure it as well too to manage the cost. And I think with all of this, you know, I was just sitting there and reflecting on the conversations that I've had over the years with people regarding insurance. Like, you don't talk to anybody about this, and I don't think anybody's turned around and said, maybe one that says, I don't believe in insurance. But for most people, they understand it and they recognize that it's a good idea. The only thing that then becomes a bit of a sticking point is the cost, right? So what are some of the things that you can think about in terms of structuring to keep your costs down without sacrificing too much? There's a difference between premium types as well. So personal insurance is quite unique in the fact that it offers two different premium types. So you've got a step premium, which is what people would know and get used to. It's the same as your car insurance, house insurance, where every year at anniversary date, it increases in value. Kind of think about it. And this is really, really creative from an industry perspective. But if you draw it out, it kind of looks like a step, right? So it goes sideways for 12 months, then it increases, then it goes sideways for 12 months and so on and so forth, right? So that's the stepped premium that everybody else is used to, because that's what every other product does. Then you've got a level premium structure, which is designed to basically keep the premiums a lot more consistent in terms of the increases each year, but they're factoring in future price rises. So it does start as a more expensive product, but over time, the idea is it becomes cheaper than a stepped premium. But when you look at it, it kind of looks level when you draw it on a graph. It's not actually level, it goes up a little bit, but yeah, that's the creative part of that. So that's some of the things that you can consider. Most of the time, for most people, we find that step premiums are the recommended path to go, and that's the one that's the most appropriate. But there's other things. You combine your policies with one insurance company. You might get, multi-policy types of discounts or multiple lives insured if it's you and a partner. We use superannuation a lot in terms of the funding vehicle for insurance premiums. So people aren't paying premiums out of pocket. They are using their superannuation fund to be able to pay for that. Income protection, similar to your car insurance, where you can adjust the excess. So if you have a prang, if you pay $750 a year, $750 in terms of your excess, your yearly premium is going to sit here. If your excess is doubled, your premium is going to be cheaper. Same sort of thing with income protection. If the waiting period is longer and you're prepared to self-insure for a longer period of time, it will reduce the cost of your premium. So there are some things to be able to get the balance right without sacrificing on quality too much. For most people, you probably wouldn't be familiar with those terms. Yeah. So most of the time it's an advisor having that conversation with you and advising you on what the right way to go is with that. But there are some things that you can do to massage the premium. I'll talk a little bit about the premiums at the end, because there's a different spin that I want to focus on the cost associated with it. But there are some ways to be able to do that.
Yeah, and then I think that when you're also looking at that, you really need to consider the tax implications of it as well. If you're holding a policy inside of superannuation versus outside of superannuation, life and permanent disability are, one of the two considerations in that tax deductible to the super fund, but not tax deductible if you own it individually. Then you look at permanent disability and there's a tax that you need to pay if you claim on a policy that's held inside of superannuation versus outside of superannuation. So you're really trying to, balance that out. And then income protection, that's tax deductible if you hold it individually, but it's also tax deductible if you hold it inside of super. For most people, superannuation is a lower tax rate, and so you might choose to hold the policy outside of super, so you're getting a greater tax deduction. But all of this, really forms part of the strategic advice. And I think that one of the important aspects of insurance is looking at, okay, what's the right type of policy, and what's the right product that's going to suit that for myself, and that really starts with advice. Understanding what your circumstances are, understanding your cash flow position, understanding what you're doing outside of insurance, because you might have the capacity to pay for insurance premiums out of your own pocket, but if your strategic goal around your wealth creation is that you're going to use a portion of, or you're going to need that cash flow in order to be able to reach your retirement income goals or do, any number of other things, then maybe you put a portion of it or all of it inside of superannuation. So it does need to be an all-encompassing approach. I think that when you look at things just individually and you're only looking at parcels, it can lead to error and it can lead to mistakes. But when you're looking at, the strategic advice, and for me, it forms part of just an overall plan, you look at, all right, where are we at? Yep. Where do we want to get to? this is what we need to do financially in order to make all of that work. This is the insurance policy that's the backup option that helps supports the main goal and objective to make sure that, okay, if something goes south, we can still get there.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And I think ultimately, if you sum that up in sort of a sentence or a saying, I mean, it's about financial confidence. So we're putting all of these great plans and talking about these aspirations and goals with people, but how do you make sure that in the event that it doesn't go to plan and something happens, you want to make sure that you protect it as best as you possibly can. And I think ultimately when it comes to insurance, peace of mind is what somebody is getting. It's one of those things, like I said right at the start, it's one of those things that you never want to use, but you're happy to pay for. And I think having that as part of any financial plan definitely makes sense. And I want to talk about a story, because I think too often we tend to focus on cost, and rightly so, right? Like, life is expensive, cost of living has gone up, interest rates are higher, so you're servicing your mortgage, you're paying more interest, not getting anything additional for it. But I want to talk about a story with my mum, and this is a real life story. So she received her, I might butcher the numbers, but you'll get the message. She received her electricity bill. And I went over there and have a coffee with her and stuff, and she was just losing her marbles. And it was $900 for the quarter. Yeah. $900 is expensive, right? Don't get me wrong. But I said to her, Mum, let's have a look at this a different way, right? I said, $900 for the quarter. I said, for 90 days, 3 months, I said, it works out to $10 a day, right? Yeah, it's bloody expensive, this, that, the other. I said, yeah, Mum, I don't disagree. But for $10 a day, what are you getting? So we ran through it. You can run your fridge. You can run your lights. You can run your TV. You can watch Netflix. You can run your internet. You can do this. You can do that. I said, what would you pay for that privilege? And she goes, well, you can't put a price on it, because what would I do if I didn't have it? And I'm like, $10 a day, when you think about it, for all of those things, is not expensive in comparison to what you're getting. So my point being is, if you take
that, Billy's an electricity salesperson.
But if you take the same approach with insurance, you look at it and go, okay, what's it going to cost me? But what am I getting in return? It's absolutely priceless what you're getting in return, because you can't put a price on financial security, financial confidence, and peace of mind for you and your family. So I think with all of this, my message with it is, you've got to be realistic about what these prices are. Another real easy one, let me give you another one, is your car registration, right? It's about $900 a year. There's a little bit more than $900 900 days in a year, but let's just assume that that's the case. For $1 a day, you can drive your car on any road. Priceless, right? It's not expensive at all, except if you go down toll roads and stuff, but you get the idea, right? So just a different way of thinking about it, a different way of looking at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think it's one of those things that it's almost a necessity. I mean, you consider insurance and you consider the cost of not having insurance when you need it. The implications are massive. And we've seen, plenty of those stories where we've recommended cover. For whatever reason, the client, hasn't gone ahead with that recommendation. And a few years later, the impact that it then has when they're on claim, and not that you ever want to say, but in your mind, you're thinking, well, if we had what I had originally recommended, then, you could focus on all the health implications and not need to do anything or not need to worry from a financial implication. And then vice versa, where, if someone has insurance, the impact that it has to them when, hey, I can take care of all of the health issues, and at least finances is one thing that I just don't need to worry about. So I think that getting advice, I think that making sure that you're, protected enough without overpaying is hugely important.
Andrew, well said, well summarized. I reckon we did that one a whole heap of justice, and hopefully people are thinking a little bit more about insurance and how it's going to protect them, how it works in regards to their financial plan. But thank you for today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Bills. Thanks to all of our viewers and our listeners. Really appreciate tuning in. And if you do have any questions or you do want to reach out, Billy's details and my details are both in the show notes. And I hope that you got some value out of it. If you did, like, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next podcast. Thanks.
Thanks for listening today. If you have any questions on what we talked about or would like to have a chat about your money journey, visit us at 360fs.com.au. The information in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into account your personal objectives, financial situation, or needs. It is not financial, legal, or tax advice and should not be relied upon as such. You should consider whether the information is appropriate to your circumstances and seek professional advice before acting on any of the information provided. Past performance is not a reliable indicator of future performance. This information is provided by Billy Amiridis and Andrew Nicolaou of 360 Financial Strategists Pty Ltd, authorized representatives and credit representatives of Akumin Financial Planning Pty Ltd.